Thank you all for being here early on a Saturday morning. My name is Diane Derby, and I am proud to be a part of Senator Leahy's staff and one of the organizers of this event. This is the 22nd Annual Women's Economic Opportunity Conference, otherwise known as WEOC. We're really happy to be here on Vermont Technical College campus, the Vermont Technical College campus. And VTC has just been a great partner with us for this conference for so many years. So it's my pleasure to introduce President Moulton.
Thank you all, and thank you so much, Diane, and good morning. Welcome to Randolph Center. I'm just really thrilled it's not snowing because that would be the normal profile for Randolph Center on a day like this, so very pleased it's not today. And thank you so much, Senator and Mrs. Leahy, for again hosting this incredibly valuable conference here at Vermont Tech. We're so delighted to have you both here and hosting this event. We're also happy to have Change the Story as a partner with you again this year. Because if there was ever a time to change the story, it is now. The role of women in the Vermont and global economy is becoming even more important. I'm the first female president of Vermont Technical College, I'm happy to say. Thank you. And I believe women have a different way of leading organizations, institutions, and events. I believe we need the more collaborative, less talking, more listening, and empathetic management style I see women embracing and embodying in their leadership roles. The time remains now for women to take much more of our place in the world. Thankfully, we're seeing record numbers of women running for public office. We need to see them get elected. We need women to get more involved locally on the state, national, and global stages. And it's not enough to say they will do it. They have to be we. My father wrote a poem eons ago about the they that will help grow a town or help a region survive. I think it's applicable for women and our work going forward, that women need to lead the change. And the poem goes as such. Who is they? Why, they is we. We are the ones who can build our town. We are the ones who can let it down. We are the ones who can make it grow, or we are the ones who can let it go. It's up to us if our town is going to boom, or we can sit back and seal its doom. Who is they? Well, I'll tell you. We is they, and they is you. And I think that's terribly applicable for where we need to be in the world. So we are they, people. We need to get it done. We must, and we can and must be the change we want to see in the world. You're here today to start making that change. Whatever it is you want to do. Change yourself, your neighborhood, your community, your job, whatever. Today is a great place to start. And I want to thank you again, Senator and Mrs. Leahy, for being the change you want to see in the world. I want to thank you, Senator, for being steadfast during the Judge Kavanaugh's confirmation process. Thank you for being steadfast in all you do in the Senate, Senator, and all you do for Vermont. And with that, it is my great honor to introduce a man that needs little introduction. The man who is fighting for women, the Dean of the United States Senate, our very own Senator Patrick Leahy.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Pat, thank you. I thank you so much for opening up the college to us, and it's one of the nice things I find this is that Pat and I get a chance to tells stories about her late father, who was a dear friend in that poem, of course, spells it out. And I would try to keep right within schedule because Diane Derby, my boss, is over there. And wanted to thank you, Diane. But would everybody here who's from my office, either in Vermont or in Washington, put their hands up? Okay. There we go. They have been working hard as volunteers on this, and I'm glad to have them. And for Marcel and me today, we couldn't believe we were talking, coming over here. We were marking 22 years of this conference. And I was telling President Moulton, when we started in a classroom in Burlington, and then realized it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And when Vermont Technical College made this available, also with a location that was far more central, it has helped. Now, let me just tell some of you who are new here, we're going to have about 400 people here today. I said in the first time that our goal is to expand the access that Vermont women have to resources, information, expertise, for financial security, pay equity, and so on. And we'd solve all those problems. Well, 22 years later, we have challenges that still remain. We've made some gains over the years, but there's still basic challenges. Every one of you know that. In 1996, women earned 72 cents to every dollar that a man made. Today, that number is closing in on 80 cents to the dollar on the national scale. Big whoop. You know, that's a technical parliamentary term that probably should be used more in the United States Senate. Vermont does a little bit better than that, but we need to do far, far better. And we have so many challenges that women face, which nobody talked about back in 1996, and now we are. In the past 2 years, we've learned so much more about how sexual assault, harassment, victimizes many women, and how this carries through in their working place, and how it can be a burden for decades to come. I don't want to make this political, and I won't. I'm not up for election this year, but in the weeks leading up to because President Moulton had mentioned the Kavanaugh hearing, in the weeks leading up to that, I heard from so many Vermont women. We heard from thousands of women around the country. But our phones were inundated, emails inundated. Vermont women who had personal stories to tell us. A friend of ours, we never knew of her experience until she told Marcel. Now, some were saying they're telling it for the first time. We were in a restaurant and somebody brought over and just put a scribbled note on the back of a napkin at our table telling of her experience. She said how the recent events forced her to relive her trauma. We heard from far too many Vermonters. And I don't mean that in a way they shouldn't call. I mean, our phones are there, they should call anytime. Or should call me. The people who come up to us in the grocery store and just say, can we talk? We've learned a lot. But despite all that American society has learned about sexual violence and its victims, it seems those in positions of influence are still haunted by the ghosts of our past. Women across Vermont and the country are rightfully infuriated that the voices of victims are still being sidelined and sometimes even silence. I spent 8 years as a prosecutor in a county in Chittenden County that had a quarter of the state's population at that time. I heard the stories of sexual assault and domestic violence victims. Nobody had prosecuted on these before. I came in, I did, over and over again. I brought the first prosecutions. Now prosecutors do, thank goodness. But I still have nightmares of some of the stories I heard and what I saw. And so that has been a great influence on my work in the Senate. I'm never going to stop working on things to ensure that survivors of violence can be heard. Marcel and I have talked about the stories we've heard. We cannot measure the damage that is done by such trauma, but we know it exists. That's why a few years ago, I took the Violence Against Women Act. And I said, we have got to dramatically improve this act. And I went to Mike Crapo, a conservative Republican from Idaho. And I said, Mike, can we work on this? And he started telling me about going to a couple of women's shelters in Idaho. And he broke down and cried. He said, I promised them I would not forget them. And he didn't. He stood with me. We extended protections to LGBT victims. We extended protections to Native Americans. For the first time, we ensured that non-Native Americans who commit domestic violence on tribal lands don't evade justice due to immunity from prosecution. Not something we see here in Vermont, but it was Mike who told me about that. And I recognize the type of cases I had seen earlier. So we're going to have to reauthorize it again. We will. We also know that we've got to have the money for it. And as vice chairman of the Appropriations Committee, I've told everybody on the committee, bill's not going to go out until we have the money in it. And again, what has made me happy is the number of Republicans and Democrats who have said, what can we do to help? People are awakening. This year we're going to see roughly $12 million in federal funding come to Vermont to support victims of crime, including victims of domestic and sexual assault, as well as human trafficking. I'm glad that I got that money, and I will spend our taxpayers' dollars for that sort of thing. And we've added a workshop this year to examine where we are in the wake of the Me Too movement. But we haven't strayed from our initial focus. We're trying to keep it clear of what we're doing, but we have highly practical workshops to help you develop better communication skills or negotiate a better salary. I know on one of these, somebody coming up to us, I was about to go and negotiate my salary. I went to one of your workshops. I did a hell of a lot better than I thought I would. So establish a better credit score. Some of the social media technologies, these have evolved since the first one of these. And we've had great keynote speakers. If you were here last year, you heard Mary Alice McKenzie address gaps in our educational system. You may remember Vermont Public Radio's Jane Lindholm, talked about how she started to embrace a career in radio. We heard Attorney General Loretta Lynch, Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor, and Lilly Ledbetter, for whom the Lilly Ledbetter Equal Pay for Women Act is named. And boy, when she spoke, anybody who was sitting here thinking we shouldn't have equal pay, their minds were changed. But I want to introduce Corinne Prevot. She is a remarkable Vermont entrepreneur. She started a successful business, Skida Headwear and Accessories, well, she was, advanced. She was a high school ski racer at Burke Academy. Of course, you start a business when you're a high school ski racer. And that was a decade ago. Now, at the advanced age of 27, I'm jealous. She's made the list of Forbes magazine's 30 under 30 national leaders to watch in manufacturing. Take that. So this is how entrepreneurship can flourish in Green Mountain State. I'm glad she accepted my invitation to join us today. Delighted to meet her parents, and along with her friends are here. So we jumped out of bed early on a Saturday morning. Marcel and I enjoyed the drive over from Middlesex. I wasn't driving, I was taking coffee intravenously. And we're here, and now the star. It's all yours. Let's give her a big hand.
Good morning, everybody. I too got up early and made the drive down. I didn't take coffee intravenously, but I did drink cold brew, which is supposed to be a little more caffeinated than the regular stuff. It's brisk, it's getting cold. We are wearing hats more and more every day, which is exciting because with our seasonal business, we go through a few months of quiet, warm weather. It's really nice to enjoy the summer months and chug away in the office, and as soon as it gets cold, we go out in town and we see more and more hats pop up in City Market, on the Hill. I'll see women driving cars wearing Skida, and it gets me excited. So it's that time of year, and it's really exciting to be here, so thank you for the invitation. So I'm going to tell you some snippets from my story, and that's really the best advice I can give. Like Senator Leahy said, I'm 27 years old, so I haven't quite lived enough to really preach a lot of life lessons, but I can tell you about my experiences, and maybe it will inspire you. But this year particularly was a really big year for me. 10 years ago I started Skida, and I started making hats, so I didn't necessarily set out to start a business, and certainly didn't anticipate standing here in front of you all today. And so 10 years of Skida, that was 10 years, it's been 10 years of unconventional learning, creating and growing, and a lot of unexpected delights along the way. This fiscal year, we sent 100,000 Vermont-made pieces into this big world. So they all went through our Burlington distribution center and out into the country, and some even made it overseas, which is pretty exciting. So that... And that's all made in the Northeast Kingdom, so we are really, really celebratory of that. Another big milestone for me was the Forbes magazine naming to the 30 under 30 list. And another Vermont namee is Tyler McNaney, who's a fellow entrepreneur, and I just had dinner with him last night, and we talked a little bit about one of our previous public speaking opportunities, which was last month in Manchester, Vermont. And Tyler, he's a brilliant engineer who has to be one of the most charismatic engineers I've ever met, and which explains his success as well. But I had a really good time talking with him on a panel where we got to kind of explore these questions that the moderator asked us. And one of the questions that came from the audience actually was about how much experience we have with public speaking. And he stood up and asked, I have teenage kids, and I would love for you to tell them your story. And what kind of experiences do you have talking to crowds and groups? And I talked about one of my most notable experiences, which was speaking to the Barnett School, which is an elementary school in Barnett, Vermont, near Peacham. And it's probably the most fun for me to speak to youth about it because it's a pretty tangible concept to explain to 10-year-olds. And, we sit down and I get their attention by asking, does anybody ski or snowboard? And they all are like, yeah. And does anybody wear a hat in the winter? And they're like, yeah. And you have them at that. And so I explained how I made a hat. And when I was 17, I was making them. So it's pretty straightforward. And there's some basic seams. And, you really have them at that attention and, even encouraging them to sew. And that was a really fun presentation. And the best part was getting around to have them ask some questions. And one of them asked, how do you make something popular? That was probably the most profound question I've ever received. And I said, oh man. And I had to think on my feet, of course. Can't show the stumped response to that one. And I said, well, if you make something that you really truly love, that you use regularly and are really proud of, then the chances are that someone else will also like what you made. And so all you need to do is share it. And that was kind of a fun improvised response to that very sophisticated 10-year-old. And as a teenager in 2008, when I began, I was also keeping it pretty simple. And at the time, I had just started cross-country ski racing, and it was a new sport for me. I had gone to Burke Mountain Academy as an alpine ski racer, and got to a point where I kind of wanted to change, and I was really intrigued by the Nordic skiers skiing around on their little skis and going really fast, and that just seemed really exciting and new. And that was the groundwork for me. And I was a student athlete in high school, so 17. And the most concerning thing at that point for me was what I was going to wear in the morning to go skiing. But I'll get back to that soon. I wanted to talk about an analogy that I often use to describe my approach to growing a business. And it's about building a fire. So there's two ways to build a fire. You can start pretty small and have some sticks and twigs and some birch bark, pine needles, and you get it in a little pile, and you might rub some twigs together. And you really have to rub those twigs together for a long time before you catch a spark. And then once you do, it might catch flame, and you blow on it a little bit, and you get some traction, and you might get a flame catch onto some of those sticks, and so you keep adding more sticks, and you see what's burning, and you see what's working, and so you add more of that, and maybe you might add some bigger sticks, and you have to be careful before you put a log on because you don't want to smother it. And so you keep adding to this fire, and soon enough you're adding logs big enough to stay flaming all night, and you've got yourself a pretty good fire. The other option is to pile on a bunch of sticks together. You get some brush, maybe some trash, you're just building a big brush pile. You throw some kerosene on it and you light a match, and you have yourself a roaring fire. So for me, I like to relate the way I started my business to the first example, where we were rubbing some twigs together for quite a while I was a student. And a lot of that contributed to this fire was right around the Northeast Kingdom for me while I was up at Burke and as a ski racer. So the first day, I remember the first weekend we wore our hats out to a race in Rumford, Maine, which is in north central Maine. And we had our team of 4 girls outfitted and our coach Corinne. And we had made the hats over a rainy Christmas break beforehand, so we were all excited to sport them. And it was a ski race. There's a lot of people around. And we wore them throughout the day. The race was awesome. One of our teammates' parents are our photographers, and so they were out shooting photos, and I will never forget that day. And at the end of the day, one of the girls from the Stratton Mountain School, which is a ski academy in southern Vermont, came up to me and she said, "Hey, Corinne, can I buy one of your hats?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And I remember she picked out this purple and black floral print and I think gave me $10. And I was like, wow, okay. Got back to the van, and I think her parents or one of her teammates came over, and they also were interested in the hats. And the next weekend was a race in Traps at Stowe, and we brought a few more hats and sold them throughout throughout the weekend, and it just started to snowball from there. And so I was really lucky to have a community like the Nordic ski community, and we were product testing early on. We didn't realize we were product testing, but we had to make neck warmers for our alpine ski friends and headbands for the warmer days, and with our new photos we made some pretty slick business cards, and we were off. And so we started gaining sales through teams and clubs all over the country. I remember following our first winter, we had a 60 hat order for a team in Alaska, and that was a really big summer project. Now we're making about 2,000 hats a week, so we've gained some traction there. So a lot of folks ask, how do I get connected with Vermont sewing? And when I was at Burke, we had made some hats. At this point, we were outfitting the whole school, and one of the most iconic hats I remember making was this really groovy dragon print, and the maintenance and groundskeeper, Rob, wore that hat, and he had a big head, so we had to make it extra big for him. And turns out his wife was a seamstress, and she connected us with the network of sewers that we're working with today. And that was a really fun connection. My math teacher, when I was, I must have been a junior in high school, she drove me down to the local shop, Eastbrook Sports, at the base of the mountain, where her husband was a bike mechanic. And this is a pretty great account of me learning what wholesale is. And so I have my box of hats, and I go down, and it's kind of a dude shop. They have a lot of bike mechanics. They sell skis. They've got all the gear. And I came in, and it was I think it was a midweek afternoon, and they were standing around, and I said, "Hey guys, I have these hats. I think your winter cyclists would like them. You can wear them under your helmet." I did the whole pitch, and I said, I typically sell them for $20, so maybe I can sell them for you for $15, and you can make $5. And they were like, "That's not how wholesale works." So they sold them for $30 to get their full market and markup, and now our hats sell for $30. So I learned a good lesson there, and we branched out to other local stores throughout Vermont through the parents of some of my teammates and other students at the Burke community, and soon we were in shops in central Vermont and in the Adirondacks, and eventually trickled out into Colorado and other ski towns was really how we were branching out at the time. And also I was running a website, and so I created a blog, which was really, really cool for me as a teenager. And I would post when I had new fabrics and new prints, and you could comment on a post what hat style you would want, in what print. You'd mail us a check, and then we'd ship your order once we received that check. I'm really grateful that e-commerce has come a lot further since then, because I don't think, that was 2008 and 2009, and I don't think someone would mail you a check before receiving any products these days. So all in all, I really owe a lot to Burke, and those days where we started were very much trial and error, learning a lot, and I was still kind of, flying by the seat of my pants, and I hadn't yet crafted my vision. And so I was really grateful for just looking back. I'd see all the times I risked failure and thought outside the box, and just not being afraid to do things differently. And maybe that's a tribute of being young, but also was just lucky to be in an environment where that was really encouraged. And so year after year, Skida continued to grow organically, and over the summer I'd work on the website, and we'd make more hats and build our inventory and prepare for the next season. And so I was also lucky that I was living in dorm rooms, so we had very little overhead and was able to put that money back into the business. And so while at Middlebury College, I took a winter term entrepreneurship class during my freshman year, and it was a 1-month class, and it was a tutorial set up for kids who had a business idea. And so I remember you to apply to get into the class, and I was like, yeah, well, I make these hats, and so I'd love to learn more about business. And they were stoked because everybody else, I was the only idea or concept that had legs and was kind of in motion already. And so that class really taught me how to look at the business, or look at Skida as a business, and to consider, where are we going to be in 3 years? What are our expenses? How many sales do we have to make to get to XYZ? And that really opened my eyes to considering these hats as kind of its own machine. And I was still skiing at the time. I was on the D1 Nordic ski team, and one of my friend's mothers from another, I think he was at Dartmouth. His mom had been a prolific Skida purchaser since high school, and I had learned that she really appreciated our hats while she was going through chemotherapy. And that really opened my eyes to taking Skida beyond the trails. And we eventually came to start the Skida +1 program. And this, again, is a trickle down through community connections. And I had received an email from a gentleman named Bill Prang, whose wife was undergoing chemotherapy at Norris Cotton Cancer Center at Dartmouth-Hitchcock. And he asked if he could buy a dozen hats for their cancer center. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. I'd love to do that. And I've always been looking for a way to grow that program a little more. And he bought that dozen of hats, and I got connected with the nurse who was in charge of overseeing the patient care, and we established the program, Skida +1. And the way it works was using our online e-commerce store, and so we have a set of promotional codes that correspond with each of our participating cancer centers. And when you place an order, you can enter that promo code, just like you would a discount code or free shipping, and we donate a hat to each of the corresponding cancer centers for every order that we receive with that code. Thank you. And we still do it the same way today. So we started this in 2011, and it's been really fun to see the program grow. We've donated over 1,000 hats, and we are continuing to reach out this year. We're trying to take on about 5 to 10 new centers. So we're going to grow our count from 10 to 20, hopefully, by the end of the year. And then throughout school, I was taking on some of the fulfillment duties, and Middlebury was kind enough to offer, they had a building called the Old Stone Mill in town, and conveniently it was right next to the post office. And I'd spend a couple hours every day packing orders and toting my bin over to the post office and mailing them out. And that was a really satisfying, just really nice escape from my schoolwork distraction and what I considered productive procrastination. But otherwise, I was studying geography and sociology, which really helped me understand people and spatial relationships, and I think owe a lot to my greater understanding of marketing and consumer behaviors. And I did a lot of work studying the Northeast Kingdom and trying to understand the area, and I was always feeling really lucky to be able to tie it back into my schoolwork, and made it all come full circle for me, which made the business part easier and feel less like everything kind of flowed together naturally. So when I graduated in 2013, I came to Burlington, and I had my eyes set on Burlington in the later half of my senior year, and it seemed like a really great place to have a business, and there were people there was a little city, and it was going to be this kind of metropolitan hub for my venture. And it's been great. We've been there for 5 years, and we now have a location on Pine Street, and we have a team of 7 full-time staff, one of which just got back from maternity leave. And we have our warehouse and fulfillment, so every Skida product is shipped out of our warehouse in Burlington, and you can come into our showroom, and it's kind of like a little factory outlet, and we have pretty much every hat available right there. So that has been a huge learning experience. Here I am now. I still don't really know what I'm doing next month, but let alone 10 years down the road. But I've been really pleased at how everything's flowed together, and I'm learning how to roll the punches and think on my feet and go with the flow. But I wanted to, I guess having the opportunity to speak here made me really think back on the last 10 years and what I'm learning and what I wanted to convey and some of the takeaways that I could share. But I was really grateful to be in an education system that was alternative, and I had a non-graded education through K through 12, for the exception of some middle school years. And that really enabled me to think on my feet and think outside the box. And at the end of the day, you really shouldn't feel pigeonholed by a degree or lack thereof. It's really about hard work and being open-minded and communicating. And communicating with your community, it really takes a village, and I've been really lucky to be a part of a few really strong communities. So if you ever feel stuck, have an idea, talk to your neighbor, you really never know where it could go. Oh, yes, questions.
Hold on one second.
Okay.
Just give a few brief instructions. Thanks so much. You make it sound easy. We know it's not. So yeah, if you hold your hand up for questions, we'll give about 15 minutes for Q&A, and then we'll make our way to workshops pretty soon. But please use the mic for your questions. Thanks.
Corinne, you're such an inspiration and what a wonderful talk. My name's Ellen and I'm part of Dragon Heart, Vermont. Are you connected to them?
Not yet.
Let's talk. Thank you. All right, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Where are you from? Where did you grow up?
I was born in southern Pennsylvania on a small hobby farm. My parents, Margie and Roger, are here. Hi. My father's side of the family had lived in the East Burke-Lyndonville area since I was born, and we'd spend countless winters traveling to Burke Mountain, and I learned to ski on the J-bar and had dreams of attending Burke when I was in the 8th grade, when I was 8 years old. And that really was a powerful place for me, and I feel lucky to be connected there still. But that was my home for probably till I was about 12.
Question in the back.
Question in the back.
Hi, Corinne. I was wondering where the name Skida came from and how you went through the naming process.
Great question. So when I was first toiling with the hat sewing project before the race debut, before we took them to Rumford, Maine, where you wouldn't expect to catch a trend, I remember someone said, you got to put a label on these. And I spent a day just Googling, looking up words, and I'd come up with an idea, and I remember my dad was working on something, or he was reading the newspaper that day, and I'd say, well, what about such and such? And he'd say, Google it. And I finally got to Skida, which is the Swedish word for ski, to go for a ski, so like a noun, which I like because it kind of takes it out of the action, and it's more of that state of going for a ski and the activity. And I Googled it, and it's the Southern Kentucky Industrial Development Association. And I think the URL had been taken, and 2 years ago I finally got skida.com, which was a really big deal. But yes, it means ski in Swedish.
That's great.
Woman in the green.
Green.
Besides what you learned from the wholesale experience, are there any other mistakes you made that taught you?
That's always my go-to question, asking people. Go-to mistakes. A lot of people question why we still do our fulfillment in Burlington and why we have it in part of our office as a glorified warehouse. Or our warehouse is a glorified office. I don't know. It's one and the same. But oftentimes I get the feedback of, if you want to grow your business, have somebody that's better at packing and shipping, or that does it professionally, do that. And I've been kind of stubborn to hold on to it because I love that we can be nimble in what we have in inventory, how we can ship it out, we can write handwritten notes to people. Someone calls and says, shoot, I ordered the Nordic hat and I meant to order the Alpine hat. We can easily swap that out for them. But I don't know if that's a mistake. Some would say it is to hold on to that, but it's been something I've been really grateful for, and I just feel like it's over the years I'm more appreciative of holding on to that. But I'll think of more mistakes as the time goes on and see if I can add to that. Anybody else? Over here?
How have you connected with people that you work with now? Is it all from the community that you've kind of grown your business out of, or have you found yourself like seeking new communities you haven't had access to before?
That's a good question. So Burlington and Vermont has been a really great hub for us, and I find that the majority of our sales are going to New England for sure. And I've been amazed at the power of word of mouth, and we'll get the Vermont connection, and the Vermont brand really shines throughout the country, and people who have connections here really feel strongly about that. So I'm really grateful for carrying that aspect in our brand work and in our marketing. And so there's just a natural kind of organic word of mouth snowball effect, but also we go to trade shows throughout the country. We go to a big one in Denver every year. That's the ski and snow sports show. It's now become just the greater outdoor winter show, and that's where we access a lot of our retailers from across the country. And then online, we do our classic social media work, and our online platform gives us a chance to reach people internationally. In Alaska, we've been having a huge kind of bubble up effect this year, which has been really exciting, and there's a lot of winter activity going on over there. So we find that it's a combination of kind of letting it grow organically, and also definitely working on marketing strategies to try to tap into that. And there's a little deviation, but one of my projects when I was a geography student at Middlebury, we were doing a cartography class, and that's map making. And so I exported all of our shop orders by zip code, all of our e-commerce orders by zip code, and I was able to map out where Skida was going. And so this was 2012. And I could see where we were shipping to, and it was amazing. It was so illuminating, and the Northeast was just like glowing, and there were these little kind of spots throughout the country. And then we were able to overlay where our retail locations were, so you could see, oh wow, there's a huge, like, people in Boulder, Colorado are buying our product, but we don't have any retailers there. So that kind of work was really helpful to illuminate the geography of where we were going. Stripes? I just see an arm.
So I'm curious if you think beyond hats and are you happy with just hats, or are you thinking like, oh, I'm going to start making vests, or like?
We have a line of knitwear that I source directly from Nepal, and that's been a really fun kind of learning experience into sourcing overseas. And granted, it's a little bit different because it's a small country, but that's been a huge kind of passion project for me. And so I've been working on some knit designs that are some vests and bigger shawls and ponchos and more garments. So that's been really exciting. In terms of volume, definitely nothing is comparing with just trying to be really good at making hats and accessories and our standard line. But I think the big picture, we need to start thinking about some summer products, and apparel maybe down the line would be really fun, but we'd really like to make more apparel options for Nordic skiing, for example. So stay tuned. Hi.
I'm a big fan of sewing as a skill, and I'm so glad that you're using people in Vermont to sew for you. I'm really curious to know how many people are sewing, and are they doing it in your warehouse, or are they doing it at home?
So we work with a network of sewers on contract, and they have anywhere from 6 to 12 sewers, depending on the time of year, depending on the volume and demand, but we really let them manage that themselves. So they're their own organization, and we're able to work really closely with them based on what our needs are. But it's true, sewing is a hard skill to come by, and it's kind of a dying breed, and it's a dying skill, and it would be great to have more kids really excited about making stuff. And it can be super simple, but getting a kid to learn how to operate a sewing machine, and if they enjoy it, maybe that can branch into other things. But I think it would be really great. I'm grateful to have learned how to sew wallets when I was young, and my mom and I were getting pretty crafty in our rural Pennsylvania days of making fleece pants and hats, and we were kind of just crafting it as we went. And it would be great to see more of that come out it's hard to find sewers. It's definitely, our production is probably our greatest capacity, or like limit for capacity right now. 2 more. Yeah.
Hi there. You spoke to this question a little bit just now, but what are your biggest challenges operating a business in Vermont in particular?
Good question. We're talking a lot about that right now. I just started getting involved with the Vermont Outdoor Business Alliance, and that's been kind of our primary question for outdoor businesses in Vermont. And it's been interesting because I think I'm involved with an outdoor business community, and I'm also involved in like a Made in Vermont community and handmade in the state. And so we definitely kind of are looking at our business in 2 different contexts and 2 lenses. I think some of the biggest challenges are the sewing capacity and finding really talented Vermont sewers that can continue to work and join the teams that help us. As well, healthcare and growing our staff and providing benefits for our full-time staff is really challenging. It's really expensive, and it's something, being able to offer one of our full-time employees maternity leave was a huge milestone for us. Thank you. But it's also a huge burden, and that's the biggest thing, is being able to treat our staff well and grow those benefits. And it would be amazing to have some support from the state for healthcare. We do a contribution. In my opinion, it's not enough, and it would be great to continue to grow that, just as we just got our letter of how the rates are changing for next year, and it's pretty scary. That would be our greatest challenge, I think. And I guess to that point too, like, I'm curious to explore this idea of promoting an outdoor brand, promoting an outdoor lifestyle, and really health and wellness. How does that translate to getting a benefit for our staff people? If these are people that are getting outside and are active and healthy, shouldn't there be some sort of benefit for that to help us support them as well? Just far out ideas, trying to get them somewhere.
Question back here.
Okay.
So I was curious, as a woman, how have you changed over this process?
Wow. I'd say as a young woman, it's definitely made me a little more resilient and tougher, and sometimes you face things that as a leader, I have to deal with it. And sometimes you walk in the door and there's something there that you have to confront for the day, and you just have to put your big girl pants on and deal with it. And I'd say, learning to go with the flow and really attacking those problems as they come has been a huge growing experience, and learning that public speaking has been challenging. I'd say learning to be a leader has been a really interesting crash course, and something I wasn't really anticipating in school or in my upbringing. I wasn't like, I'm going to be an entrepreneur and I'm going to own a company and this is going to be my thing. I was learning a lot along the way, and I'm still continuing to learn. And so I have I'm 27, I have a lot to grow, a lot of room to grow. Thank you all.
Thank you, Corinne. That was terrific. I think if you don't mind me saying this, I'm going to add a little piece to all of that, which is, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe she never actually got a commercial loan to grow her business. Is that right? So she did it very organically, as she said.